All right, I was asked in the very beginning of the May season, who did I think was going to be the most influential card, the best card of May? And I thought, honestly, it was this. I thought it was Sasquatch. And now having gone through most of May and deck building for this card, I truly still stand by that statement, and I will gladly show you why. Welcome into the guest list, folks. For those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming. Let's talk Sasquatch after you hit that like and subscribe button down below. Let's swing on over here and see what she's going to be bringing to the table. Let's see Sasquatch as a 6/10, costs 1 less for each card you played last turn. Now, there's something really important here I want to articulate about this. This 6/10 is never a 6/10, okay? It's always a 5/10 or lower, because the only time you're not playing a card before this card is if you're full skipping. And the only time you're ever doing that is to play Infinite and maybe She-Hulk. So this is always a 5/10 unless if your opponent has Mobius M. Mobius. In that instance, this is a solid 6/10 no matter what. And I'm pretty happy about that. This is stats. This is always going to do well. Look at what happened with Cull Obsidian. Look at what happened with Mockingbird. Look at what happened with Rulk. If you haven't learned that stats do well, I don't know what game you're playing. This is going to be an absolutely stupid, fantastic card, because playing cards is what the whole game is about. So how can you take advantage of it? Well, first off, let's make one thing very clear. It is played cards, not cards added, not cards that materialize, no reductions in that sense. It's cards that you take from your hand and place down onto the battlefield. There is one technical sort of exception to this rule, and that's Mysterio, who's probably the #1 synergy with Sasquatch, because Mysterio plays 3 illusions down. Therefore, that will count as a triple reduction for Sasquatch, and the following turn after that, Sasquatch is now a 3/10 just after Mysterio alone. This will not be the case for cards that add cards to the battlefield like Shauna or Squirrel Girl or Brood, for example. Those are added cards. Cards that come on down from locations like Savage Land and I don't know. You name your favorite card location. Monster Island. Name your favorite in the chat or down below in the comments. But all of those, yeah, they don't work either. So this is just what you take and place it on down. But think about how turn 3 can go. If you're playing Angela Kitty Pryde, a very common duo right now in Marble Snap, play both of those cards on turn 3. Okay, that means Sasquatch is a 4/10. Next turn, you can play a 4/10 down with no downside. There's no void to worry about. There's no negative affliction to worry about. It's just 4/10 because you played cards. Yet alone could be potentially 5/10. Now, with that said, I talked about Squirrel Girl, and there is technically a synergy there because you have to look at the full scope of the cards that will synergize heaviest with Sasquatch. You're going to need protector cards, whether it's Kyera or Armor, because this is a 6-cost card. Even if it's reduced, remember, it does get protected by Kyera. Maybe you're looking at a Cosmo, maybe you're looking at protection that way, but very often this card is actually going to synergize with heavy card play. This looks towards bounce, and a lot of people have been saying bounce. And I'm going to tell you right now, the best deck with Sasquatch is not bounce. It's an option. It's not bounce. Let's get off of that copium train, please, first, before we dive into these decks. This is a very, very good card. And my live chat's corrected me because, yes, Sentry is now a 4/8 anyway. However, all of the afflictions that come from the conditions of Cull Obsidian needing to have a 1-cost card down or have to be winning the lane via Crossbones, there's lots of 10s that interfere, or big cards, I should say, that interfere. Sasquatch is something as a 4/10 that's going to be incredibly strong with very limited issues to have to play down. So let's look at not just Sasquatch, but also how the spotlights are interacting with Sasquatch. If you look at what else comes out, you see Havoc and Ravonna. Now, I know they're 2 Series 4 cards, and believe me, I'm not happy about seeing 2 Series 4 cards simultaneously. I am the personal belief that every single week should have new card, Series 5, Series 4. Make it even, make it consistent. If you're going to give us inconsistency on return, give us consistency on the series of card that will be put into spotlights. That would be something I would love to see. If you agree with me, please let me know down below. Havoc and Ravonna are very interesting with Sasquatch in particular, because Ravonna has a lot of synergy via Sasquatch because you're cheapening cards, right? Cards like Havoc, where you can get it down for 1 cost. You can play down Sage, one of the most recent releases in Marvel Snap. You can play down Wolfsbane or Angela, or you can play multiple cards because of Ravonna Renslayer. And Ravonna's really like probably a top 20 card right now within the meta. And this is important if you're going to want to play Sasquatch, because there's going to be a lot of it. And Ravonna is a card that also needs cards like Mobius very often. Look, you don't have to have Mobius M Mobius, but it's going to be a great option to tech against it if you want to do both things simultaneously. But if you want to go all in, which is a little bit more how I like to build my decks, go all in on it and play as many cards as possible. And don't worry about Mobius, because if it happens, look, you can just retreat. If you're in a competitive game like a Conquest style or a tournament, you might have to factor it a little differently. But I like to go lean a little heavier all in on the deck style versus the amount of defense that I run. But that's just how I like to build decks, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's dive into a couple of the decks that I've built for Sasquatch, because I do think that this is a very good week overall for spotlights, even with Havoc involved, as I drink water because I'm losing all of the hydration for the filming of this video. Let's go take a look real quick at deck number 1, simply calling it Lots of Littles. Why? Because it's lots of littles. That's it. It's lots of littles. But it's not bounce. Here's the thing. I kept going back and forth on this deck and these decks and trying to figure out what was going to be the best way to represent it, right? And Hitmonkey comes up all the time because you're playing Mysterio. And Hitmonkey is a substitute, in my opinion, in this deck, because Hitmonkey replaces Sage. So if you don't have Sage, you can put Hitmonkey into this deck. The reason I like Sage better is because it's less conditional on the timing of getting those card ramps to happen. And Sage, the ceiling for Sage is very comparable to Hitmonkey, but more of a time flexible card to work with. So I'm more a fan of her in this deck because of how it all plays out. You have the Hood, which is going to give you a demon, and you have the Mysterios. Those are all going to be pieces that can reduce down the Mockingbird. Additionally, you can take the Nico Minoru and transform something into a demon as well. So now you're looking at how Mockingbird is organically fitting into this deck as a late game play versus you have Mysterio, you have Sasquatch. You can let that be your turn 2 into your turn 3 organically. But if you don't want to do that, play down your bishop on turn 3 and then let the Mysterio clones illusions come on down later on. So I'm a fan of how these types of not bounce decks, because like it's really Kitty Pryde and Beast. To me, I identify bounce as having to have Falcon. Falcon doesn't make as much sense with this deck, in my opinion, and I like how Mysterio is kind of reinforcing its position via Bishop and ramping progressively as Angela, Bishop as the engines here, but the later game Sasquatch, Mockingbird, and Sage are what really give a lot of power. Like I said, you can put in Hitmonkey if you don't have Sage. It's a substitute option, so I'm just calling it simply Lots of Littles. The closest thing I have to bounce for these decks, because I wanted to go a little bit more obscure. Like Ravonna, Drac, Dump. A combination of using all of the spotlights all together. And yes, I have a classic version as well, but let me showcase what Sage and everybody does in this deck. Look at all of the targets for Ravonna Renslayer here. You've got Dracula, you've got Sage, you've got Angela, and Havoc. That's a lot of power that can be dropped down onto the battlefield. And Dracula with Ravonna is a synergy that doesn't get utilized very often. But in a Drac Dump deck, it could actually be a game changer because you can play down cards like Havoc and not be as worried about needing to dump your entire hand. You can let Havoc come down on turn 4 or even turn 5 and still get everything out that you want to allow the Dracula ramp to happen, the Havoc ramp to happen, the Nebula, the Sunspot, all of that is still going to be able to pop off because you were able to play down all these cheap cards and let the big ones stay in your hand, or let Sasquatch come on down as a part of the general package for this reduction because you've played down, let's say, Angela, Havoc, Sage, all on one turn, and now it's a 3-cost card on turn 5. I really like that, and it's a great option to just keep in your hand if you need to for Dracula to absorb and become a 4/11 that can't be Shang-Chi'd. It's a great backup plan, but don't worry if you don't have Havoc, if you don't have Ravonna, if you don't have Sage, you don't plan on getting either of these 2 cards, that's okay. You can still take advantage of it in a classic variation of Drac Dump. All of these cards, look at what's here. You have Sunspot, Nebula, who's going down by the time by next week, is going down a series as well. Strong Guy, Dracula. This is a much more traditional variation on Drac Dump where Sasquatch organically fits. It leans more into the Strong Guy synergy, which is why Blade has now made the cut, no pun intended, into the deck. And it gives you another way to look at Drac Dump for Sasquatch because it's a lot of cards going down for cheap that allows it to accelerate out faster. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world because Dracula's there to save your behind. Big fan of Drac Dump as a target for Sasquatch. This is Green Evo, and this is just a ridiculous amount of power. And yes, Sage can be substituted out for Shocker, so don't worry. But I like Sage a lot. I think she's one of the top 10 cards in Marvel Snap right now. Let me know if you disagree or agree with me. Here's what I have and why. I think Wasp is a huge synergy piece for Sasquatch. It's a cheap card that you can put down to just have it be your well-timed reduction for Sasquatch. So to get the most out of it, of course, we're going to want to play High Evo because now you've got the Affliction side onto things. And I leaned heavily into just getting the big green cards down, like getting Cull Obsidian down, I think is incredibly important because you are playing Sunspot and you are playing Misty Knight. 1 drops that you want to drop early rather than late. So you're gonna have a target for your Cull Obsidian to go on down. And because you have rampable ones like Sunspot, which you could substitute out for Nebula if you really wish, and you have Misty Knight constantly giving more power to your entire board progressively each turn because you're playing off of the curve, I felt good putting Kyera into this deck. And Kyera has not gotten a lot of love recently. Yes, you can go ahead and put in Armor as a substitute, but I love how this could be a potential play where Sasquatch and Hulk are still incredibly big, important cards at 6'10", 6'12", She-Hulk 6'10", Scar 6'11". This is a deck, because Cull Obsidian is in it, is a reason I think that Mobius M. Mobius actually will survive against this deck. If you want to tech in a Rogue or a Enchantress into it to help give that curve a little more help on the latter end, you can absolutely do that as well instead of Sage or Kyera. But I think that, look, 10 is still strong. Sunspot's still going to ramp up. And either way, Hulk is a big freaking card to have to deal with all by itself on turn 6. So you're giving a lot of skips, which means Hulk is ramping up to 6, 16, 18, etc. I think that this has an opportunity to survive Mobius M. Mobius and be a clean play line for Sasquatch because it can always be a 5/10. It can always go down in synergy with that Wasp and Cull Obsidian and now become a 4/10 on turn 5 with a Misty Knight if you need to ramp it out faster, or later, I should say, excuse me. So there's a couple of options here that I think make Green Evo a fun and potential option. No. Anyway, let's move on. This is called Pat the Squatch, which I just thought was a really fun name. Really fun name. And I wanted to build a Patriot deck because a lot of the synergies that we see coming from Sasquatch are Mysterio, right? Patriot Mysterio is a great 1-2 punch, but how can we capitalize on it in today's Marvel Snap? And I was like, well, we've got the Squirrel Girl. That's all already organically going, as I struggle on those two words. Already organically messing with Mockingbird. But the thing that I liked about this the most is the fact that I can reduce down that Mockingbird and actually use it as a target for Blink. And Blink in Patriot is incredibly exciting to me because it's a good way to utilize the Mysterio clones if you can't get the Patriot line down. And if you get Mockingbird specifically to be the thing that rotates in and out, you're potentially pulling out Dr. Doom, which means if you pull the Mockingbird afterwards, well, now it's free. Or you pull the Onslaught because you put it in the Patriot lane, which is reinforcing the Patriot and the Blue Marvel. So whether you're putting down Goose and then blinking a card in the Goose lane like a Mr. Sinister or one of the Mysterio clones and have it be one of the big oomph cards, or if Sasquatch is just going to be followed up because you put down Squirrel Girl plus Mysterio on turn 3, y'all, you can drop Mockingbird and Sasquatch together on turn 4. Wow. That should not be slept on, and be ready for that, especially because one of the counters that people will try to come up with is Sandman. Sandman's a big counter to these combo cards that allow multiple cards to come down on the final turn, so I would totally expect that. Be ready for that, and that's how you can be ready for it. As long as they don't have Mobius down, they go ahead and Sandman on 5, it doesn't matter. You've already put down 3 Mysterio illusions, a whole bunch of squirrels and the Squirrel Girl, plus a Mockingbird and a Sasquatch. Oh, by the way, then later you can play single card by single card and have good things happen afterwards. I think that Patriot is a huge winner here with Sasquatch, way more than Khazar, because Zoo makes a lot of sense. And I kept looking at Zoo decks going, how can I make this work? Because look, you're playing down Squirrel Girl, you got a lot of 1-drops and yet alone a lot of on reveal 1-drops. I actually stayed away from it. I said that on reveal 1-drops in this build actually felt worse because I don't want to play multiple 1-drops. I want to play multiple other cards. I want to play multiple Mr. Sinisters. I want to play multiple cards that I can blink. I want to get Dr. Doom bots down. That's what I want to do. Playing Khazar on turn 4 in this build is very clunky. That's why there's no 4-drops at all, because you want to play your entire bottom half as often as possible to give you the flexibility of that Mockingbird, the Sasquatch. Let those little cards rain on down and then restrict even in the Goose lane where you can then get a Doombot, or you can put down an Onslaught in that Patriot lane because you blinked it in. Like, there's a lot of cool things you can do with this deck. Be ready for Patriot to make an appearance with Sasquatch. I think that there's really something there. Now, I also got cooking given the recent OTAs, where Sentry, which I misspoke of before, is a 4/8. And I wanted to do something a little different, and I feel dirty. I made a deck called Shuri Got Dat Junk. Hear me out. Ravonna, great synergy, right? We've talked about that at length. But what else can Ravonna hit that's really important in this type of deck? And I was like, well, could we get Shuri down early? And what benefit do we get for playing Shuri down early? Because you could easily do just as the Red Skull line with Shuri Red Skull, right? Shuri into Red Skull into Taskmaster, like you know that line. But because you played a card on turn 4, you could also do Shuri into Sasquatch into Taskmaster. That's still a 20 power card. That's still a 20 power card. You can't sleep on that. But what if you also then got the Ravonna line? Well, you could, yeah, you could actually go Ravonna into Shuri into Sentry into Taskmaster and Annihilus. Or Taskmaster and Hood Annihilus. Okay, now I'm listening. But that's a lot of big cards, so if we get that line, that Scar is going to be a 2/11. Okay, how does a 4/11 feel? That feels pretty good too. I wanted to put together Shuri Junk deck. And Shuri's starting to make a little bit of a comeback because it's a clean and linear line. And I went back and forth on if Annihilus belonged in this deck more or if Lady Deathstrike belonged in this deck more. And I feel that overall, Annihilus is still the better card, because even when you do play the Sentry out, chances are they've already got that down to at least one card in that other lane anyway, and they're going to start to fill later on. So I like the notion of the flexibility that Sasquatch can fit into this deck as a 5/10. Plain and simple. Give me a 5/10 as is, very linear, very clean, play big card, get big reward. That's what this deck does. Play big card, get big reward. I think that's pretty safe. So let's see what it can do. And I apologize in advance for this, because it could be a thing. Thanos Returns. Look, Sasquatch is a big card that likes a lot of little cards played. Stones are a lot of little cards. Professor X is a great card. Cannonball is a great card. Vision's a great card. I can get more energy with Hope Summers and get out a whole bunch of stuff, right? Okay, let's build a Thanos deck. And I went with this build because I think the Prof X Cannonball package, with having that be a 5-cost card package, feels very strong to me for current versions of Thanos. And I went back and forth on, can I get Eliath into this deck? And I don't know if I want Eliath in this deck, but I tried really, really hard. You might be able to substitute out Red Hulk for that reason and put in Eliath if you want to go the full control route, because you are playing Shadow King, you are playing Mobius M. Mobius, you are playing Professor X. You're restricting the ever-living everything out of your opponent via this deck, and I think that flexibility speaks volumes. So I wouldn't be surprised if we could figure out a way to put Eliath into this build, but Sasquatch is going to benefit from the Thanos deck tremendously. Very regularly, Sasquatch is going to end up being a 4/10. And if Cull Obsidian taught us anything, Thanos decks like 4/10s. So let's have it fit organically, where maybe, if we get lucky, we play Hope Summers on 3 and play a boatload of stones and Jeffs and stuff afterwards. That Sasquatch being a 3/10 on turn 5, plus you can play more stones, or you can lock things down. Like, yeah, this is a very strong idea. We just saw Thanos decks also make competitive reappearances in Lambie Series Open again. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more and more Thanos appear, because Sasquatch yearns for small cards, and Thanos automatically comes with them. Lastly, we've got the BK Bigfoot. It's a Black Knight deck, and I sat on stream talking through my thought process on this deck, going back and forth, because it feels weird to have a Black Knight deck that only has one discard card. And I kept going back and forth, like, do I want the Squirrel Girl Mockingbird package in here? But I ended up settling on not putting in Blade, which is a very common card for discard in Black Knight decks. But the reason I didn't was because it gave me more flexibility to have not only the Squirrel Girl Mockingbird package, but have a little tiny bit of tech in there and play Killmonger, and therefore have the Killmonger Death package as well. Look, Lady Sif into Ghost Rider as a 1-2 punch is automatically fantastic, but if you remove the Black Knight Lady Sif Ghost Rider from the equation and look at the remainder of the deck, this is going to be 3 big cards almost guaranteed every single game. You've still got Squirrel Girl putting down the Mockingbird. You've still got the Mysterio putting down the Sasquatch. You've got the Blink blinking up something to get one of those other cards out. And if you can Killmonger the Squirrel and get the Death out also on turn 6, hey, that's fantastic. But this style of deck really wants big cards, right? So I went with Giganto and Infinite. Almost went down the path of, as we saw in the Snap Judgments League Week 3 broadcast, we saw Giganto and Infinite play into a War Machine package, which you could easily do. You could easily take out Blink and put in War Machine, or take out Killmonger and put in War Machine into that deck. But I do like the idea of playing a Black Knight combination as a backup because Black Knight also becomes fodder. If you don't have the Lady Sif, that's fine. Just destroy it. It's one more reduction for the death and makes it even more attainable to get that card out later on if you need to. Plus, it can also mess with the Lady Sif by having it be Killmongered, get the death down below the 6 cost, and then do your Lady Sif to guarantee the new hit of Giganto or Infinite, and you've upgraded versus downgraded because you had to hit the death. Sometimes that feels bad. In this case, I think it might actually feel good. So we've got a couple of options on how to work this Black Knight style of deck, and please take this shell, take all of these shells, work with them, find variations that work for you, because I do think that Sasquatch is an incredibly strong card this season. Stats are always good in Marvel Snap, and this is a 6/10. That's never a 6/10. So let's collectively say it's a safe bet that Sasquatch is going to be a good card. I think that this is an absolutely safe investment of your collector's tokens even, because big beefy cards always have a home in Marvel Snap, no matter where Shang-Chi is. And yes, there is going to be a rise in Shang-Chi play during the week of this card. We saw it start to disappear, and we're starting to see him rise back up again. He was at 40% play rate. Now he shot back down to 20, and now he's kind of hovering around 25. I expect that to go up even more with Sasquatch. Even with that said, though, I think Sasquatch is absolutely worth having in your collection, absolutely worth your collector's tokens, absolutely worth 4 opportunities to get it. I think you will be incredibly happy with having Sasquatch in your collection because of everything we've learned from the other big cards in Marvel Snap. So Sasquatch is an absolute double thumbs up. Yes, 4 or 5 star, top tier, whatever you want to call it card, I recommend getting unconditionally into your collection in Marvel Snap. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. I really do. And if you did, let me know down in the comments below. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, share with your friends. And what would you do different so we can look at these decks? Because we're going to be testing them on twitch.tv/ItsGuestGaming. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a lot of decks that he does very well in. So come join us for the party. I will see you all there. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening.